Swinging a fly ball, left field, it's deep, it's way back! The Tigers are going to the World Series!
1-1. Fly ball, right center. Deep, got a chance! 500! Miguel Cabrera has done it! Right relaxed stance, tucks the left shoulder in, cocks the bat over the right. 1-1 ground ball. Base hit into right! 3,000 for Miguel Cabrera! 1-2, swing a line drive down the left field line, hooking for the corner. Fair ball up against the wall. Fielding is in. Torkelson is in. They're waving him home. Torkelson around third. He will score. 2-2, Sweeney takes off. Fly ball right field. This one's deep. Going back is Brennan. He's looking up. And it's gone. Oh, man.
It is October. The Detroit Tigers are still playing baseball. I am shocked. I'm thrilled. And I'm even more thrilled to be sitting across Dan Dickerson today, a real hero of mine. Thank you, and welcome to the Spiro Avenue Show.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun to be talking in October while the Tigers are still playing baseball.
I was telling everybody, I talked to your wife, who was a professor of mine at Michigan State and have stayed in contact with. I had so many athletes and people of note through here. This is the only show I've kind of been nervous for because I've followed you for so long. And I'm such an admirer of your work, and I know how busy you are at this point. So especially now, in light of everything going on, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. A lot of off days in the off season, so this worked out well.
Yeah. It's incredible to have you. I mean, what timing, especially with what happened with that Carpenter blast. So I'm going to get it out of the way now, my fawning for you. I'll embarrass myself a little bit, then we're going to get to it. So, Ben, let's embarrass me a little bit. What have I said about Dan Dickerson? We'll run down some of the elements of praise for what a fan I am of yours. So there's nobody better at baseball, calling baseball than Dan Dickerson. I watch and listen to many broadcasts league-wide. Trust me on this. He's number one. All right, we'll roll. I don't know if you even know what the kids say about goats and being the greatest of all time, but I said you and Mr. Benetti are the goats of broadcasting. We'll roll next, Ben. I said you guys decided to have an elite TV broadcast, adding Jason Benetti. I said he's so damn good, and we got Spartan Dog Natalie Kerwin on these broadcasts, and I said Dan Dickerson, the literal best radio broadcaster in the league, is still here. Ben, let's keep embarrassing me. I promise this isn't a good way, Dan. Dan Dickerson is a freak of nature. I've never heard the guy botch a call. I haven't heard it. I've never even, maybe I was watching Benetti at that point. I've never even heard him deliver a B- call, 100 miles an hour on the black, etc. Let's keep rolling, Ben. Pitchers and catchers reported the spring training. Cool. Wake me up when Dan Dickerson reports. Ben, is that what we got? More? Okay. He said, God, Dan Dickerson is so good. Is that it, Ben? Okay. I think he's got a valid argument for the best in the game today status. I mean, it keeps going on. Ben, are we out of him? Okay. I'm almost glad we're out of him. I mean, I'm a big fan of yours. So I got that out of the way.
All right.
You feel pretty loved in this town, though. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very nice. I mean, I don't actively look for comments online. I learned a long time ago that's not really the place to go. It's just when you get feedback, unsolicited feedback, that's nice. That's, to me, it's like, okay, I must be doing something right. I know there are people out there who probably aren't big fans. That's okay. But you figure, okay, the main thing I want to do at this point in my career, call a good game. Am I painting the picture? And do you get the big moments right? Do with Miguel, it was like, don't F it up. But, for the rest of the time, it's like, do you get the big calls right? Do you kind of rise to the moment? So those are kind of the big things for me.
It's funny you say about looking up your name. You're one of the few people that could do that and not worry about it. I don't hear bad stuff about you. Honestly, I'm surprised.
No, I'm just a baby. A few years ago, I stopped. You just read one comment out of, however many that are nice. You're like, oh, come on, man. I'm doing the best I can, whatever it might be. So, but people are very nice, and I do appreciate that.
Well, it's maybe especially high praise for me because despite the praise of those, I'm actually pretty cynical and, a media critic in a way. So you're probably the only one that I'm hyping up to that level. So, yeah, I'm not an easy one to please in that regard. But again, such a fan of yours and obviously a fan of what's going on. I'm hoping that you can shed some light on this because I'm a diehard fan. They're my number one team among the pro teams.
Yeah.
I've watched them since I was 5 years old. I've watched baseball even when the Tigers are out of it. I love it. I've never seen anything like this.
I've never seen anything like it either.
But what's worse, I can't explain it. How are we here? Do you have any concept of how we're here right now?
It's just been so fascinating to watch because it's what are we up to now? 34-14 stretch or 35-14, going back to that August date when they were 8 games below 500 and started this run. And it truly is. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but I don't really believe it is when you talk about the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, because it really is a good phrase in talking about just those rare moments when all the pieces come together. If you measured them individually, it wouldn't add up to something that you go, yeah, that's a team that could go 34-14. But because they have come together in a certain way, they believe that they're good. I can't say enough about the coaching staff and what they have done with these guys and the way that Scott Harris talked about it when they completely reshaped the roster in the space of about 3 weeks. It was Carpenter and Green getting healthy. It was Dingler getting called up first. It was Meadows and Torkelson coming back, and it was Young and Sweeney coming up in mid-June. They kept talking about, plus Hannafy, plus Gunther. I mean, those guys have done a heck of a job, plus Herter. So you're adding all this youth, and they never stop talking about winning, which I think is so important, because when you're talking about development, and the development always has to continue at the major league level. You're not done when you get to the major leagues. They help those guys understand that. Continue to talk about winning. It's not that we're going to continue to develop and let's hope we get a few wins along the way. No, we're going to develop you to your fullest potential, and that is going to continue your entire career, by the way. But we're also going to talk about winning some games now that you're here. And so that continued focus. And then AJ always talks about the biggest thing when I ask him about young players coming up. The thing that he always gets back to is you have to develop a routine first. You have to understand when I say we have to do whatever we can today to win today's game, and that's all we're thinking about, you have to understand what that encompasses. But that encompasses you got to take your 50 touches with Gary Jones if you're an outfielder and he's going to hit you balls. You're going to get out there with Joey Cora, and he's going to just hit those little tappers right by the dugout. You'll see it if you go to a ball game. Every day they're out there doing that. You're going to put your work in. We're going to do some game planning on the hitting side, but you have to go do some game planning yourself. I want you to think about this so that we can bring the plans together during the game. You're going to take your swings. You're going to go in the weight room first before the day starts, and you're going to get your work in there. So once they understand all that goes into winning one game on one day, then with all the work that the staff does, you're getting up in the big moment. And this is what really impressed me. Okay, now the games start meaning something. Oh, wait a minute, we're over 500. We're within 5 games of that last playoff spot. That's when it kind of hit me. It's like, oh, all right. And AJ always wanted to see what this team would do. We've had, I think, 2 good finishes in his 3 years. Like last year, 19-10 finish. Nice. But it started from 14 games under the 500 mark. So I think he really wanted to see, okay, what can this team do when they're playing above the 500 mark and now playing for something that's meaningful, playoff spot. No one saw this coming, but all this preparation helps take the pressure off when you're standing at home plate or you're standing on the mound because you've prepared for this moment. Sean Gunther put it really well the other day. It's like it's trust and belief. Trust that they're putting you in a situation to succeed and belief that you can do it. And that's every single day that message gets reinforced on the pitching side, the hitting side, the fielding side. And so they're just playing a really good brand of baseball. But to watch it all come together with a roster that's half rookies, this is something that I would argue is not unprecedented in Tigers history, in baseball history, with the way they're playing at the most important time of year.
And I mean, you said it, but it's not just rookies. It's, I mean, there's a few exceptions, of course, but mostly, non-heralded rookies. Trey Sweeney's considered a fringe prospect. And is he crushing the ball? No, but he's had a couple big moments, a couple big home runs. And just yesterday with that double play.
That double play was phenomenal.
That was not a routine. I mean, a soft tapper. If he doesn't pull that, Detroit, good chance they lose.
Yeah. Well, if they're down 1-0 going to the ninth, it's just different. It is.
Oh, much different.
It's absolutely different. So, no, Trey Sweeney's been terrific. I think I forgot. No, I mentioned his name with Jace Young. But, I mean, what a pickup. And then, that's why never judge a trade at the trade deadline. Try to give it your best shot at understanding what the Tigers got back, but admit that maybe you don't know a whole lot about Trey Sweeney before you say, that's not enough for Jack Flaherty.
but even in the Scott Harris version, if you asked him the day of the trade, I don't think he would say, "Oh yeah, Trey Sweeney's going to be critical to a playoff run this season." This is why it's so shocking.
No, you got a left-handed hitting shortstop that I don't think people understood how good he was defensively, and this is where the good scouting comes in. You're getting him from an organization that has a pretty good track record, the Dodgers, of developing guys and making them better once they bring him into their system. And he came from the Yankees system. They noticed that, and that made him an attractive piece.
I mean, the way the pitching has been, you could argue it was it may have been an accident. It was actually a buy trade to trade Flaherty to get this guy. I mean, Sweeney's been unbelievable in these big spots. It seems, anyone that's a fan of baseball for a long time, especially if you have an affinity for one team, as I do, I assume you do as well. You have those teams that give you a sense of dread, even really good teams that the Tigers have had a sense of dread. It's something's going to go wrong. And, it could be the best team that you've had in 20 years. I can't explain it, but I have the complete opposite with this team. I expect them to come through. I'm almost shocked if they don't rally.
It's a good way to put it, because I'm finding myself, I remember being more not nervous, but just that adrenaline's pumping in the late innings of playoff games in the past. And maybe I got used to it because I've been fortunate to be part of many postseasons. But this team just gives me a certain calm that I'm not, just like, you're right. You feel like they're going to do something. The number of ninth inning rallies, and maybe it's just because you're like, whatever they do from here on out is gravy, but that's not how they're looking at it. It's like, no, we want to win this thing, and we can, because we've faced some of the best teams in the last 2 months and beaten those teams, and we can stack up against anybody with the way AJ is putting this pitching together. But the late inning at bats, wow. And the late inning leverage innings by relievers, incredible.
In your role, you feel the difference from the past 2 months compared to the first few months? Does it feel different going downtown to the ballpark?
I mean, yeah, down the stretch, it just did. Just because everybody's just, happy, got a little extra in their step. And I mean, I truly mean this. There's not a bad day at the ballpark. There isn't. It's just more fun when they're winning.
I saw a great interview you did a few years back. You said people, because your first full year was 03,
right,
which was 119 losses. And you said, I tell people I loved it then too. And they say, oh, come on. And I'm with you. I went to more games that year than any. I was in high school still at the time, but I loved going there. I just love baseball. So I'm
right.
Like
I remember listening growing up listening to Ernie Harwell, listening to the 1975 season when they lost 19 straight games. I remember listening and just thinking, yeah, I still want to listen, because kind of the old Ernie Harwell advice, you never know what you're going to see on a given day. You might see a good game between two bad teams. You might see a great individual performance. You might see something you've never seen before. That's why we love the game. That was advice he gave me early in my career. I'd never done 162. I hadn't done any minor league seasons. I'm not sure if I'm going to like baseball after 162 games. But when you just break it down game by game, kind of like AJ Hinch talks about, truly you're going to appreciate anything that goes on in this game and those little fine details of the game that make it such a great game. Hopefully you're going to learn from that, and then you can bring it to the next broadcast or bring it to a conversation with a player or coach.
It's interesting because you, in your time as broadcaster over 20 years now for the Tigers, as the primary solo guy for play-by-play, you've seen 3 different versions of good Tigers teams, I would argue. 2006, out of nowhere, nobody saw that coming. In hindsight, you look back, that was a really good team, and we just didn't really know yet. And, Maglio was still coming off the knee thing in the year prior. But that team was not a bunch of, fringe guys that got hot. There was some bona fide stars on that team. You saw star-studded teams in, 11, 12, 13. Ooh. 13, I would argue, the
13,
best.
13, yes.
Yes. And, that's sort of a different version. We expected them to be great. They were star-laden. This is its whole other category, which we've already kind of touched on. So with that in mind, I want to put up what I would say are the best pitching performances in Tigers postseason history over the course of the playoffs post-2000. So we're leaving Mickey Lolich out from the 60s. So this is, by ERA, the best 5 performances we've seen in your era post-2000. Kenny Rogers in 06, the best, I think, without question. Justin Verlander in 2013. I was at that one earned run he gave up on that Mike Napoli home run in Game 3. Anibal Sanchez in 2012. Doug Fister, I think people would be shocked to find him on there, 2012. And now Tarek Skubal. Now Skubal's still active. He could move up or off this list entirely. But you covered all 5 of these performances. Where do you put Tarek Skubal and what he's doing with these guys? I know it's early, it's still active, but are you getting the impression where you're as confident in the chair that you sit in watching that he's going to shut down the opponent? Is he at this level yet?
Justin Verlander to me was, just the best big game pitcher I've ever seen. But he is rising to that category with his utter dominance. That Houston lineup was dangerous. Cleveland got 10 hits off him, the only team to get 10 hits off him in a 7-inning start earlier this year. And what he did to them in Game 2 was really impressive. It's just the constant adjustments that he's making start to start. So he has been phenomenal. He is right up there. But Justin Verlander in those back-to-back years in Oakland, in Game 5s, almost to the day, clinching Game 5s in Oakland in a 2-2 division series to go 17 innings, 1 run, or shutout innings, 6 hits, 2 walks, 21 strikeouts, something ridiculous. Those were the 2 greatest single individual performances. Justin Verlander, to me, is the best postseason pitcher I have seen. Tarek Skubal is rising rapidly in his first exposure to this, to do what he's done. Phenomenal.
It's unbelievable. The difference between them, even taking the postseason aside, and the reason I'm more pro Verlander is you can't go wrong. It's just the volume.
It's the volume.
250 innings at his peak. Verlander in his MVP season. Skubal's at like 192 or so. It's a big difference. It's like, 7-8 more starts of 7 innings. So
but if the Tigers keep going, he's going to log a few more innings in those 13 that we've seen.
Oh yeah, and that's he's on the board, right? He's already on the board, but it's like, like I said, he could play himself up the list or a little bit down. But the way he's locked in right now, I'm as confident as I've ever been in a guy going out there, and that's why I posed it that way. He may give me 1 fewer inning than Verlander, but I got a better bullpen now than Verlander had back then.
No question.
06, different story, but he wasn't Verlander as we know him then.
Right.
Those teams had bottom 5, 10 bullpens by ERA every year. Not this group.
Not this group.
It's okay if Skubal gives me 6 or 7.
Yeah, and it's interesting what AJ said. So there was he made the comment that he's still kind of scratching the surface of his potential. And this is after he got off to a good start. So I asked him on a pregame show, what are the areas that he can continue to grow in? Because this is a guy who always wants to get better. But one of the first things he mentioned was handling the expectations. And I thought that was really interesting, that everybody expects you to be great every time out. Maybe not throw a no-hitter like we used to think with Justin Verlander, but be great every time out. He said, you've got to learn how to handle those expectations. All eyes on you around the league, around Tiger fandom, and everybody is looking at you. And I thought that, okay, that's something he's got to learn how to. You talk about handling it, my goodness. So, but that was a big step in AJ's mind for him to be that elite level pitcher. And then it became, some of the finer points of the way Jake calls a game, the way he might want to spin it on a first pitch strike. But that is part of the deal. And once you learn how to do that, and look how he waved to the crowd last night after, I don't know what inning that was. I just saw the highlight where he's like, come on, bring it on. And I think he likes the big stage.
Is there a little bit of Max Scherzer in there with him in terms of the intensity or that they're screaming? Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, I think so. But it's Tarek Skubal. He's unique. He's just one of the nicest people you're going to meet and the biggest competitor on the mound. And I would say that's true, with other Tiger pitchers too. But he just, I don't know, he's something to watch. I love how he lets the emotion out.
He gives just great answers. He's an excellent interview. I watched your entire episode with him, Have a Seat with
Oh,
Benetti,
my gosh, he was great.
Talking about his hair and all it's superstitious and all that stuff. He was great on that appearance. He's just a really cool guy and blunt. It just kind of tells you what you're asking, which is pretty rare.
It is. I agree.
He's not guarded at all. And you mentioned the Tigers coaching staff and the importance of them. I've argued, although someone in Allen Park might disagree, and I can see the argument, but in my lifetime, I would argue Chris Fetter has been the most important, if you want to call him assistant coach, pitching coach, whatever, in Detroit sports professionally in my lifetime. He's the most important assistant coach in my lifetime for any of the teams. Am I overstating his importance? What do you make of Chris Fetter's role in what we've seen here?
No, and I had talked with AJ about this a few days ago on the show. He says, that's my guy. And he said, I wear him out. I want him for breakfast. I want him for lunch or whatever it might be in my office, talking all the time. But along with Robin Lund, who he brought in, and Juan Nieves that AJ brought in. So you had kind of the professor of the analytics and the body mechanics and how the body moves, strength and conditioning, kinesiology background there. And then Juan Nieves, the major league pitching experience there. They become good friends. And I like how they all interact, but it starts with Chris Fetter and what he brought to this organization was, the kinetic chain. And it sounds so boring, but for him, it all starts and you go right down to the ankle, from the ankle to the hip, to the way you move, to your arm, all of that, it has to be working. And there's no cookie cutter motion. It's how does your body best move? But understanding that, and that's where they always start, has led to all of the things that we have seen. And you can't say enough about the biomechanists and the algorithms they write. And you can say, well, that's a lot of information, but what do? They simplify that information. But Robin Lund is constantly looking at, everybody's got the information, but how do you use it? Looking at those little things that he finds that are markers for maybe a guy is tiring, maybe a guy, you're getting into this bad habit. Here's how you were moving, when you were pitching really well. So they blend all these things together. It all starts with Fett. And I think he's been unbelievable. His dedication to the job, his game planning. He does the game planning for each game with the catcher, with their hitters or with their pitchers. But it starts with him and just understanding. I mean, look what they're getting out of guys who are just up from the minor leagues, who are older. Sean Gunther had 20 innings in the major leagues in 2021. Tommy John comes back. It's understanding. Let's throw this pitch more. Let's scrap that pitch and add this pitch again and again and again through this. This is your best pitch. Let's use that. Or this is your best pitch. Let's set it up better so that it becomes even more effective. Whatever it might be, he's got such an understanding, and there's so many levels to it. He's nice enough to, I chat with him a couple times a year at length, just kind of off the record so I can understand what they're doing. The number of layers there are to this, it's unbelievable. To answer your question, though, in one word, yes.
Very important. Well, and you look, I would welcome anybody to look up for themselves. Go name by name what guys were doing in AAA and then compare their numbers up here.
Yeah.
They're better here, which
Right.
doesn't make any sense. And you get occasional outliers. It's virtually all of them.
Yeah, it's hard to really judge those minor league numbers. The run scoring environment is so much higher. Think of it. It's just under 4.5 at the major league level. It's 5.5 at AAA. So I don't even know what to make of those numbers. But this is where I think the Tigers organization is so good. They're not looking at the numbers. They're looking at how are you getting people out? Are you working on what we asked you to work on? And we're not going to worry about your scoreboard numbers as they talk about all the time. Ty Madden got called up with a 7.97 ERA at AAA. But why did he get the call? Because they had him working on specific things. He had to throw more strikes. Over his last 4 starts, it was 5 walks, 37 strikeouts in 24 innings with 28 hits, which suggests some bad luck. But they knew that he had done what he needed to do. And they didn't care that his ERA was near 8. They knew he could help the Tigers, and sure enough, he has. Peter Montero earlier in the year, he hadn't gone more than 5 innings in a start in the minor leagues. I think it was 13 starts because the pitch count was high, the walk rate was high, wasn't throwing strikes, but they believed that he was maybe on the right track or that they could get him into the strike zone. Getting young pitchers to believe that throwing strike one is the key to the whole thing and not being afraid to be over the plate with their stuff is one of the biggest things you can do, and the Tigers have done it with player after player after player. Peter Montero's come up, and he's gone 5 innings almost every time outside of a couple of starts. And think how different that is. But so that development continuing at the major league level, and it just starts with this coaching staff, and again instilling that belief in these guys. Okay, my stuff is good enough to be here and get outs.
And it's even coming, going away from AAA to major leagues. Look at even just major league level. Somebody like Jack Flaherty, who was in a 4.5-year slump. I mean, way down from where he was in 18 and 19, and comes here after getting booed out of Baltimore. They despised him there. Comes here as one of the best pitchers in baseball. he's traded. Look at his, I don't know if you've seen his numbers in LA, nowhere close. He was effective, but his ERA, if you include his postseason start, is now, I think, over 4. It's like 4.04. His whip went way up. He's been good in LA, much better here, and it was overnight. So he's struggling, comes here, he's great, leaves, immediately drops off. Chris Fetter's got whatever magic you need. He's got the solution. Do you think he stays here? Is he as attached to the hip, to AJ Hinch's hip, really, as some people think?
Yeah, I don't know where he'd go that he would have. I mean, I don't know if fun, because he's got so much on his plate. I don't know if fun is the way to describe it, because I think he internalizes so much and he wants these guys to all be so good. And there's always somebody who's struggling that he has to make sure he can help fix. But I just think, I mean, unless he wants to be a manager, I don't get that sense that that's next on his agenda. I think if you're in a spot where you like the staff, you like what the organization is doing, you like how you're being supported in the organization, you have these ideas, but it was going to cost some money to add a biomechanist and all these analysts who are running the algorithms, and to add a guy like Robin Lund. They had to have Robin Lund because there was so much on Chris's plate. He's got 13 guys every day that he has to work with. He couldn't do it all. He was trying to, and that's where Robin Lund comes in. They said yes. They added a Robin Lund. So I don't know. I think he likes it here. I think he and AJ have a great relationship, and I can't picture him going somewhere else. I mean, everybody worries about it, but I'm not. I mean, he might, but I think he likes it here.
Whatever I can do, I'll chip into the fun, because you guys pay the guy. I said, if he's going to take a $5 million pitcher you're taking out of free agency and make him a $15 million value,
right.
I think he's more than paid for himself already. So it's at that point, it's almost crazy not to do whatever you need to keep him.
And think what Scott Harris said when he got hired. We want this to be an organization where players want to come to get better, wherever they are in their career, rookie, a couple years in, or veteran. But a lot of teams talk that way. But then Chris Ilitch supports all the ideas that Scott Harris has. To do that, you need all these things. We need a better clubhouse. We need a better weight room at home. We need these things in terms of the analytics and in terms of the support staff. All of these things. And that's why, it's not sexy spending, but millions have been spent to bolster this vision. But there's no question the word is getting out, starting with Michael Lorenzen last year. And now I think Jack Flaherty would probably say the same thing. Pitchers and players who come here like, oh yeah, they've got their stuff together there. You will get better if you go there. That's high praise. I mean, it's one thing to say it, but then you live it, and then you make sure that you're following through on that vision. Word spreads, and players are going to now want to come here, you would think.
And I mean, the perfect candidate would be for this upcoming Hot Stove League season. It's Walker Buehler from the Dodgers. Just high level pitcher for years. He's been down for 2 seasons or so. That's the kind of guy where I would say, man, if I'm him or his agent.
Yeah, if you thought the health could hold up, I mean, that's where it all gets back to the medicals. And what does it say?
Right.
Has he had 2 Tommy Johns, I think, now?
Yeah, 2 majors. I don't know if they're both Tommy John. He's had 2 major surgeries.
2 major surgeries. But yeah, I mean, if you feel like you see him and you go, yeah, there's something to work with there. It's just the results haven't been there this year, right, in his limited innings. But yeah.
I'm saying if you're him, though, like if you're him, right, I would want to come here because,
please call the Tigers. Let them know that I'm interested.
Exactly. Because I'll sign a 1 or 2 year deal and then I'll go get my big deal after. Because Flaherty's going to get paid now.
You would think so. You would certainly think so.
Yeah, he'll have plenty of suitors to. I mean, his stuff has been so good. So we'll transition to this. I mentioned I'm a huge Ernie Harwell fan and still, think of all those summers growing up, and he was kind of on all the time. Classic Michigan family. He was always out in the backyard and the big radio.
You can remember right where you were at so many moments.
Oh,
right?
My God.
You can remember right where you were.
The soundtrack of my childhood. And, you took over. I was, I think, 16 when you did. So you carried me sort of the last couple of years through and into adulthood. But so I've argued the succession plan that occurred there is one of the best I've ever seen, probably the best. Ben will throw up some of my commentary on the backstory with you guys and you taking over. I said Ernie Harwell passing the torch to Dan Dickerson was the greatest succession plan in the history of broadcasting. I think we have another. Yeah. If it weren't for Ernie Harwell, Dan Dickerson would be even more beloved. A legend replaced a legend. anyone with the MLB app, I went to law school in Chicago, so I watched you and listened to you guys all the time. But anyone with the MLB app knows Dickerson's not normal. I meant that in a good way.
That's true. I mean, that's fair.
And I compared you guys to Joe DiMaggio passing the torch to Mickey Mantle, the two greatest succession plans in the history of the universe. Mick taking over center for Joe, and Ernie passing the torch to you. So, I know you get asked a lot about Ernie Harwell. He's so beloved in this town still, years after his passing. What did he mean to you?
I think it was the combination of growing up listening to him and Paul Carey, his partner for 19 seasons. And then, it's so funny. There was no grand plan for me. I like sports. I like broadcasting. Let's see where this goes. I was in news most of my career until I got hired at JR in 95 in sports, and that helped get me to the booth with Ernie in 2000. But it just, so in the 90s, so I'm in Grand Rapids for 15 years, or for 8 years, long story short, from 80 to 88. I come to Detroit. I'm working at the all-news station WWJ. Little sports, little news. It was important that I kind of get to be known as a sports voice because I covered Lions pre and post while I was doing news stuff. So kind of a 2/3, 1/3 job. So it wasn't a big stretch for JR to hire me full-time in sports in 95. So now I'm full-time in sports, 15 years in my career for the first time really ever. And that leads to more opportunities. But in that time, once I moved to Detroit, I started to just practice my baseball play-by-play. I'd done basketball and football in Grand Rapids. And I just started to practice down at Tiger Stadium. I'd go down there. They had the old football broadcast booths. Lions had moved to the Silverdome in 75. So I'd go down there and I'd clear off the space. I'd set up a microphone and tape it. But I remember, A, liking it right away, but I'd never called a baseball game. And then B, calling Ernie Harwell, which was funny because I'd met him, but I guess we all felt we just knew Ernie Harwell, and I don't know, his number was probably listed in the directory, in the phone book back then. But I remember calling him and saying, would you be willing to listen to my tape? And he said, why don't you come over to my house? Sure, I'll come over to my house. Come over to my house. So I can remember so vividly sitting at his kitchen table, and I got the notes somewhere, just the basics he told me. But it wasn't just like, oh, you'll do fine, that's nice. Little things like, hey, the ball's not down low, it's low. It's not up high, it's high. One less word, but you don't need that word. It's clearer when you use fewer words, when you don't need them. Keep your scorecard in 2 different colors of ink, and this to this day. So I, showed him my scorecard, or maybe I didn't even show him my scorecard, but that was really important because you're always working off your scorecard, you're reviewing the game. So everything in red is a base runner. Every out is in blue, and you can immediately look back and see where the red is gathered or not, and where the blue is. And but that was a big help. So to this day, every base runner's in red, hit, error, however they reached, and then all the outs are blue. And then I've tweaked it. Everybody tweaks their scoring system, but that was just one of those little things. So he listened to my tape. He gave me some nice feedback. I always think of this literally, and I think of this every time the guy makes a catch. So when an outfielder is camping under a fly ball, say he makes the catch when the ball is still maybe 20 feet from his glove. He said, if he drops it, you can say, oh, he dropped it, but makes the catch. So now you make the catch and you're beating the crowd. It's just, you're staying ahead of it. Instead of reacting to the crowd, you'll hear the crowd, cheer with the catch. I mean, little things like that. So he meant everything to me. And then, giving me that last inning, I'm sure you've heard that story at the last game at Tiger Stadium. He gives me one of his last 3 innings. Turned out to be 2.5 innings, right? And that was everything. That was everything, because I don't think there's any question that one inning helped get me into the booth the next year as a middle innings guy. And to be the middle innings guy for a guy who, I wasn't even thinking about his retirement. But when a legend retires, it's important to have a familiar voice replace him, because we saw in the early 90s, they didn't do that, and it was a disaster. And so that was huge to get into the middle 3 innings, so that when he does decide to retire, it's not a big stretch to say, we're going to make Dan the main guy. It took him a while to figure that out, but it worked out in the end. They kept me in suspense. But he meant everything to me. His support, having me over to his house. He wrote a little note to me when I did my first Michigan football game, filling in for Frank Beckman, who was doing Tigers baseball. They subbing in September. Just two sentences. heard your first football broadcast, did a great job. That was it. I still got that just tucked away somewhere. So all those little moments and then the big moments of working with him and seeing how he did it. And why did he sound so good? 50 plus years into his career, calling his X-thousandth game still sounded like the Ernie Harwell I heard growing up. It's because he brought a certain joy to every single day at the ballpark.
He felt like your dear friend, even if you had never met him. It was
Right.
It's like I met him a few times over the years. Everything people say is true. Nicest guy ever. But I felt like I knew him already.
Right.
That's what he felt like. And honestly, I feel like you're the same way. I think you guys have that in common. And there's other great broadcasters that don't have that component necessarily. I don't know that it's necessary, but it's nice. Do you think it's fair to say, you have at least heard that compliment, that you kind of feel like Dan Dickerson?
Well, I don't hear that a lot, but I mean, if that's what people feel and think, that's great because, that's, again, why I felt like I could pick up the phone and call him.
Right.
Even though he probably didn't know who the heck I was.
He showed up to your fantasy baseball draft. Was it?
Oh my gosh!
I heard that story. You can tell I'm a fan of yours. I watch a lot of your stuff. But wasn't it in Grand Rapids or something?
It was in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And, my good friend Dave Kagan was in the ad business, and he's got all the particulars. But the long story short, so we started our rotisserie baseball league because that's what the early leagues were called, not fantasy baseball. Rotisserie baseball in the 80s. I think we started in 84. And so we had our end of the year duck ball is what we called it because rotisserie league baseball came from the fact that those guys who formed that met at La Rotisserie in New York, the restaurant. Our first meeting was at Duck's restaurant in Grand Rapids. So we became duck ball. So we have this postseason gathering where we hand out silly little awards and to honor the winners, the losers. Who are the worst picks, all that kind of thing. And then, so Ernie's in town for a book signing. And I think one of the guys in the league owned a bookstore. And maybe he was going to his bookstore. And it was like, hey, would Ernie like to come to our postseason banquet? I mean, who says yes to that?
And he's already a legend at that point.
Right. So I think they're through an intermediary, either through the bookstore or it might have been Rogers Department Store where he was signing. We got him to come. He said yes. I mean, for goodness sake. So there's a great picture of me sitting next to him.
I've seen it.
And it's just like, oh my goodness. But that's Ernie Harwell.
That's
just
incredible.
say yes,
Him in a nutshell. And there's just I don't begrudge anybody for not being like that. That's a pretty high standard, but that is rare. I mean, that is tough to find somebody like that.
It really is.
And especially with his, cloud that he already had. And he was, like I said, a legend already at that point. What you did taking over for a legend like that, it really, regardless of who it is taking over, it shouldn't have worked. You don't want to be the guy taking over for a legend. You want to be the guy replacing the guy that replaced the legend. And we've seen it repeatedly throughout the industry. It just doesn't, it's tough. It's tough. You not only succeeded, I would say you thrived, and you're over 20 years later have done that. Was there a point where, you come into this situation, you're already a fan of his, even if you weren't, everybody else is, and everyone's sad that he's leaving.
Right.
Did you ever go home, you're talking to your wife and saying, honey, I don't know, I'm a little nervous. What if they don't like me? Was there any part of
No, again, the 3 years in the booth with him helped. And then the other part that helped was my first year, I don't think anybody was listening. So, you can just kind of grow into the job a little bit.
That's actually a good point. What if they were
seriously, you're like, at the end of the broadcast, like, thanks for listening tonight. And you felt like you go, Steve in Wyandotte, appreciate it. Lucy up there in Troy, thanks, appreciate it. I mean, you felt like you could thank them one by one. There couldn't have been too many people listening to that team. 119 losses. So I think that was an advantage. I mean, if that had been a good team right out of the gate, it might have been a little more scrutiny. I do remember there was a full page in the Free Press after my first spring broadcast of like, how do you do? And, comments from people. And I don't think I saved that one. But I did benefit from being in the booth with him. So I'm not an unfamiliar voice. You can't replace a legend, whoever it is, with an unfamiliar out-of-town voice. I'm convinced of that. They brought in Bob Rathman and Rick Riz in the 90s when they forced Ernie into retirement the first time. Those are two good guys. I've gotten to know Rick Riz. He's a terrific guy. They didn't have a chance because it was a very different style, and they were unfamiliar voices. So they didn't have much of a chance from that standpoint. They have a familiar voice. That was a big deal. And I don't think it felt like a leap. I hope it didn't for most people because they'd heard me call games for 3 years. Like, oh yeah, okay, that's not a bad choice.
It was kind of like interesting, like unique. I don't know. Maybe that's common. I haven't heard of that where it's this kind of slow roll transition where we're, easing the passing of the torch, easing you in where you're taking innings here and then the middle innings guy, and then you're just the guy. I think that was a huge help. It seems to be.
Oh yeah,
in your opinion, right?
Yeah, and then Ernie did 3, and then he had a middle innings guy for his entire career, and then it was 3. So to get those middle 3 was huge.
Well, I mean, to whatever you attribute it to, you pulled off something that's really difficult to pull off. I mean, it's hard to be good at your job anyway, but replacing that guy, it's not an enviable position, really. In my opinion, it's not what most people want to do, but you were able to do it and thrive. Are you aware, and I'll transition to this, Ben, if you could throw up, are you aware of the Dan Dickerson calls account on Twitter?
Yes, my wife has showed it to me, and yes, whoever it is, thank you. You're doing a very nice job.
It's flattering, right?
It's very nice. It's very nice, and it keeps me on my toes because it's like, seriously, you don't want to mess the call up. And I'm to the point now I don't worry about that. But when I listen back, I'm like, you just want to make sure you get the big moments right, and you kind of forgotten how it is. And social media has grown a little bit since the Tigers were last in the postseason. And so you realize it gets played a lot more. You knew that in the past that your calls are going to get played a lot, but now with social media, they get played even more. But it's good. I'm like, okay, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. That's how I listen to it. That might have been a little too much. And I'm like, oh, whatever. I was pretty excited.
I mean, Tony Paul from the Detroit News, a good friend of mine, but I mean, I was telling you a little bit before the show, big fan of yours as well. But he and I were reveling in the idea that you can't blow a call. He says almost never. I say never. But I mean, you say you really don't want to blow on. What is the art to it? Because I've heard you say you don't anticipate what you're going to say, but you have to be ready. I mean, how do you do it?
Yeah. So for like the milestone calls, it's just be ready for the moment and give it a good call. Paint the picture, coming around into the dugout, back out, acknowledge the crowd in Toronto after 500 for Miggy. My philosophy on those is then you have to have something to say after that to try to capture the moment. And I always think of, you never know where the inspiration for that will come from. I thought about it a lot. But I was just talking to my son one day, not a big baseball fan, doesn't follow very much. And I told him this call was coming up, this moment was coming up. He goes, well, how many players have there been in baseball history? I'm like, oh, well, I said a little over, depending on how you want to, when you include the Negro Leaguers, I think it's over 23,000, or I think it might be closer to 30,000 if you include the Negro Leaguers. So anyway, I think I said 23,000 or something. It's like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So instead of saying the 29th player to hit 500, which I did work in, I went with, there have been more than 20,000 Major League Baseball players. He becomes the 29th to hit 500. So just something like that. Put it into perspective, right? Try to capture the moment and add a little bit to it. Now, when it comes to big moments like an Andy Ibanez double in Houston, you really just kind of anticipate what might happen. And I like with Maglio's home run, I was picturing a single to right because he was so good at that. And then he hits the home run, and you can hear the surprise in my voice. I mean, that was just a bomb, and thank goodness it was a no-doubter. That was very fun. Thank you, Maglio. But otherwise, it's just kind of, you're trying to think the situation. Something that I work on to this day, which drives me crazy, making sure you got very clear which runner's at which base. Because I think that's probably one of the trickiest things for a baseball announcer. I talk to students about this all the time. You've got to get the ball into the corner, who's going after it, which runners are being waved around, get them in the right order. And I didn't do it perfectly on the Ibanez double. But you kind of anticipate what might happen. And Carpenter yesterday, I was anticipating a line drive single. And then he hits the bomb of a home run. Nobody hits home runs off Place. So you try to anticipate what's the most likely thing, but just be ready and be ready with, so you're constantly, and again, I work on this all the time, and I'm not great at it always reminding which defender is where, who's going out maybe for the cutoff, because the more detail you can get in, the better, right? Not just relay from the outfield, but Rocchio's relay from the outfield or Pena's relay from the outfield, whatever it might be, adds just a little bit more. So the more that you can get in all the elements, chasing it down, runners circling the bases, who's on the relay, what kind of throw home, what kind of slide, you're not going to get all that in. You're going to have to go in and backfill. But you just kind of anticipate. But for me, I find that the more I review in my head or even out loud, the names in the outfield, the names on the infield, the base runners, Rogers at third takes his lead, Meadows at second, whatever it might be, that helps. And then just the repetition. If I blow a call or if I'm not happy with how I did it, I'll sometimes just practice on the way home, just like, okay, that caught me off guard. Maybe it was something I hadn't seen before. How can I do that better next time? Because I'm never satisfied. I mean, if I feel like, rise to the big moment, but it's always like, I can do that better. And I think to me, doing it better is just little things like who's the relay from? Not just relay from the outfield, Pena's relay from the outfield. Those little things matter, and I think it makes the call better.
Trust me, you're an A+, so you may want to be better, but I think you're already you're pretty much maxing out the broadcaster meter, at least from this chair. Let's play your most famous call. I know you've seen it a million times. I do have a question about it, though, after.
All right.
We'll run that. Ben, can you run the Maglio home run, Dan Dickerson call, please?
Swinging a fly ball, left field, it's deep. It's way back. The Tigers are going to the World Series. 3-run walk-off home run. Oh, man. Ordonez around third. He's into a bomb seat at home.
You've told the story recently, or somewhat recently. Did he call that home run? Is that true?
So yeah, there was the moment, and I would love. I've gotten different versions, but I think the basic elements of the story are true. He was due up fifth that inning, and they're literally deciding. It's a tie game. They're literally deciding, are they going to put the plastic up in the clubhouse or not? They've got to have the plastic up because if they win, they're going to be up there. And so clubhouse guy comes down to the dugout. I think at that moment, Maglio's on the steps down the dugout because he's still several batters away. And he has a quick conversation. And I think the gist of the story is that put it up. Basically, I'm gonna deliver this.
Put the plastic up.
Put the plastic up.
Unbelievable quote. It's the modern day Babe Ruth called shot. I'm rolling with that story, whether it's true or not.
Even if it's a bit apocryphal, there's an element of truth in there, and it's pretty cool.
He's honestly my number one. He's my favorite player of my lifetime that's played here. So Maglio's my number one guy. I loved him even in Chicago. I was thrilled when we signed him, even with the crazy knee stuff.
Yeah,
he was doing experimental,
right,
crazy stuff to try to save his knee. Signs, I think it was like 5 for 75, something like that. Everyone ripped that deal around Major League Baseball, by the way. Same thing with Pudge. I don't know if you remember that. Yep. Both those deals, consecutive off seasons, people were ripping them.
Yep, they sure were.
What a reckless deal, bidding against themselves. They shut up pretty quick when those guys got rolling, especially in 06, Maglio's second year. But so yeah, the Maglio story is incredible. I know you get asked this all the time. Your Jason Benetti experience working. Now I know you guys have done a little crisscross, but you guys do. I don't know what. It's not really a podcast. What you do, your show that you do.
Yeah, it's a pod. I mean, we call it a podcast.
Yeah, I guess whatever. There's cameras, so I always think of like audio for podcasts. But
so do I. But yeah, I've learned that podcasts are now,
interchangeable.
Both, yeah.
You do a great show with him, which I watch pretty religiously. I'm a huge Benetti fan as well, and was, before he got here. That's I posted one of the tweets for you earlier in the show where it's like the two goats. I got the best TV guy and the best radio guy now. Ben, let's play a little bit of Benetti just for the audience. I know most people already know his work, and I want to get Dan's opinion on this great guy and who's just been such a hero in this town already. Ben, let's roll that.
Going to work out of the wind here with the bases loaded. And Carpenter hits it high in the air. Deep right center field. It's a slam. Tigers win again. A city that doesn't care about the odds has a baseball team to match.
What has Jason Benetti added? I mean, he's unbelievable from your perspective, being an expert in this field and obviously so good at what you do. What has he brought to the broadcast from the TV side?
Oh, I don't know. I don't get a chance to listen to him often. I mean, I love listening to that. I've heard him mostly on basketball and college football, where he's outstanding. I just love having Jason around this organization at the ballpark. It's a good day when you see Jason Benetti at the ballpark. We hit it off right from the start. We knew each other from, the years that he was with the White Sox, but only, kind of casually. And then I remember we were having it just kind of when he, I think, had his introductory press conference. We had a meeting in a conference room with Ben Fiddleman, who kind of oversees the broadcasting, with Ron Colangelo. Just kind of kicking around ideas for ways to make both radio and TV maybe better. And so Jason and I were immediately disagreeing about like the whole topic to me of when a game becomes a blowout. I believe you stick with baseball because there's still plenty of things to talk about. You don't have to stay real descriptive on this game because it's a blowout. You can talk baseball. And Jason's like, oh, no, I believe it. And so we're kind of going back and forth on this, having a good time. And Ben's watching this and he just goes, you guys want to do a podcast together?
great call, honestly. It's a great show.
I mean, I didn't even hesitate. I'm like, yes, because I knew we'd have fun. And I knew that what he brought versus I'm kind of the straight ahead interview style. He comes in at you from right field or left field and you never know what's coming, but he has such good questions that just get the best answers. And at least it's such a good conversation. So he's just, and he's helped me. I don't ask him for a ton of advice about calling TV, but I just kind of watch and listen. And we talk about kind of the differences. And I don't know, it's just, I think his friendship has just meant, I'm going to call the game differently than he does. He's got a certain style. That's why we hired him. I'm going to stick a little more to the straight and narrow, and he's going to go off on tangents and just hop on and go along for the ride because it's going to be interesting, whatever he does. But I've really enjoyed filling in for him. And then it just, learning the craft of TV versus radio. It's different. But Joe Davis said something to me this winter that I really found helpful. He's like, you're not a TV broadcaster or radio broadcaster. You're a baseball broadcaster. So you know how to call a game. Just call the game. Understand the differences between the two mediums. And that's a good way to put it. So I'm still calling a baseball game. I'm describing less. I'm still talking. It's like, it's all about the analyst. Well, that's true, but I'm still talking. I want to lead them to a conversation. I don't want it to ever be a Q&A. I don't like that sound. I'd rather make a comment and have my analyst build off of that, or better, bring something of his own to the conversation. And all the people I work with do that very, very well. So it's been a lot of fun. I think as the season went on, I think I did close to 30, not quite. I got used to just getting on talkback. Hey, can you give me a shot of this? Hey, can you guys build this graphic real quick? Because we've got some really good people back there. They're typing up. They've got the graphic because you should be supported visually if you're going to bring up numbers. So, and the people on Bally's, they're just great people. Every producer, all the people behind the scenes, they want to make you look good. There's more planning because you have to, but I found I enjoyed all of it. Radio's my love, but I really enjoyed filling in. But Jason, I don't know, he's just brought this certain joy to the ballpark every day. I love it. I absolutely love being around him.
Were you surprised he came to Detroit? I mean, a White Sox fan, that was his dream job growing up. Like, why is he here, do you think?
I mean, he's talked about it a little bit, but I mean, I think it was just they're got a little contentious, some of the relationships in Chicago, and he can go into that detail. But
okay, yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know
he was open to a change in scenery.
Gotcha. So, and I mean, from an on-field perspective, man, what a good call that was. I mean, he's calling this what a debut. It's like the complete opposite of when you came in 2003, where it was just the bottom, and he got out of the bottom, the new bottom. They beat the Tigers AL record, and just happy to have him. Honestly, he's done such a great job.
He's lifted everything.
Yes,
his presence here, his mind, and his sense of humor. But he's sharp. He knows what a good broadcast is, and he's pushed them this year. And I think, some people are like, oh, what is this? No. He knows what he's doing. He knows what good TV is. And he has lifted everything up. And to have him here and the relationship that we have, and everybody's trying to make both broadcasts as good as possible, it's been big.
The fans love them. I don't hear a negative Benetti opinion.
There shouldn't be one.
I said it with you too. This is why you guys are the best in the league. Because, and boy, if I didn't think that, I wouldn't say it. I mean, I don't know. You're not familiar with my work necessarily. My audience knows. Like, if I thought you guys were just okay, I would. I'm not one of those Homer Detroit guys. I would actually be pretty vocal about it. But we really, I think, have the two best guys.
Well, I appreciate it.
It's just we're so fortunate as fans. So we appreciate you. I want to get a little bit into this briefly. I know we're running a little long, so I'll try to make it quick. But Mike Ilitch versus Chris Ilitch, I'm not going to put you in a bad spot with, asking you any grilling questions. But just around the ballpark, your experiences with each guy, similar, different? What do you make of, those two in the transition, just from your experience being around them?
Yeah, I never really got to know Mike at all or really had any conversations with him. I do remember, I think he was influential, maybe. I think Ernie was very influential. But after I did that one inning, the last game at Tiger Stadium, the owner's booth, it wasn't a suite, was right next to us. And on the way out, we had a long post game. He just stuck his head in the door and said, "Was that you I heard earlier today?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Good job." And he walked away. So we never really had any relationship or really any long conversations. I have with Chris. It's just there have been circumstances where either I've interviewed him or just crossed paths with him, and I like our conversation, so I've gotten to know him a little bit, and it's been really nice. He's a genuinely good person who cares about the people who work in this organization. So I admire what Chris is. Everybody's like, he's never going to spin like his dad did. Okay, let's also maybe acknowledge that his dad probably spent, above what this market could bear, but he wanted to build a winner, right? His dad had a simple philosophy, and it worked. People come to see stars. That's why we got Miggy. It's why Steve Eisenman was with the Red Wings for his entire freaking career. So, and I love that. And I think Chris is showing how dedicated he is to baseball by doing all that non-sexy spending on infrastructure and foundation to build something that Scott Harris believes can be sustainable. These all sound like buzzwords, but what's wrong with trying to build something that not just for 1 year? If the Tigers go deeper into this postseason, which I think they will, this isn't something that's going to be a one-off. It's going to be something that they believe they can continue to add to. Okay, what do we have to address this offseason? Usually a veteran bat is in there somewhere. A veteran arm, whatever it might be. And I think, Chris Ilitch has certainly indicated by all the support stuff that he is doing and spending for support staff and whatever it might be. What they did in that clubhouse is phenomenal. They had this tiny little weight room, and they had to do something. Well, there was no room to expand to. Oh, wait a minute. There's all that dirt behind home plate. Let's just dig out all that dirt, and they expanded this weight room. It's beautiful. But that's the commitment he has. So I think he's a terrific owner. I think that he is committed to this team. And it's not always going to be about payroll. And I think Scott's made that very clear. It's like, hey, you can expand payroll this offseason. Is that always the answer? Or is it more being very intentional about signing a guy here, a guy there? Or think of what Dave Dombrowski did in building those championship teams, making big trades. Look at the trades Dave Dombrowski made.
Oh, my God.
Carlos Guillen, Placido Polanco, just start there.
He stole both of them.
Trades for Anibal Sanchez, all trades for Max Scherzer. So, and that's the other piece that I think when you bring in more talent like Scott is doing with his staff into the organization, and there's no question, you talk to Ryan Garko, where this organization is in terms of young talent versus 2 years ago. Now, at some point, you're going to trade for need. Okay, maybe we have too many guys who are going to fit here. Let's trade one of those guys to get the piece that we need over here. And that's what a good farm system allows you to do. So I think Scott's point's a very good one. They'll spend money, but they'll be very intentional. And it's not the be-all, end-all when you can do these things that they're doing with a low payroll, but also because you've added talent and because you have a coaching staff that gets the most out of these guys.
It's a good offseason if you need a first baseman. I'm not going to even go into that because we're already running long, but it'll be interesting to see what they do there.
It's fun that we're not talking about it right now because we're a little bit preoccupied.
I know.
with
But there is look, I'm not going to worry about it, but the Rockies in 07 were really bad in 08. Like their follow-up to their incredible run was they fell on their face. They were 20 games out, or I think they lost 90 some games. Now they were actually good the next year.
Look at Texas this year. I mean,
a little more injury related in my opinion.
Sure, but you just don't know what's going to happen the next year, and that's why you try to head it off by making very proactive moves.
But luckily, we're going to be so worried about that parade downtown that we're not going to be thinking, this team doesn't lose. They win every game. It seems like. I'll finish here. Look, maybe this is a little bit self-indulgent. I'm such a big fan of your wife. Your wife, for those that don't know,
Lorianne,
unbelievable.
Amazing.
Michigan State professor. You might have gathered that you're in a Michigan State.
I did detect a theme.
Yeah, there's a certain color and general theme here. It doesn't hurt that I'm Greek and on that side, actually from Sparta, what's known as ancient Sparta.
Awesome.
So that's it helps a little bit. But your wife, I would argue. I mean, I went, like I said, grad school 2 times over, obviously at Michigan State. She's as good of a professor at any level of education I've had. And really what a power couple you guys are. I've said it again and again. It's like the best professor at one of the best journalism schools in the world. And what I think is the best baseball broadcaster in the game. So let's play it actually real quick now, Ben, and then I'll throw it back to Dan. We'll wrap. A little video of your other colleague, Natalie Kerwin, was in talking about your wife, Lorianne Dickerson, the other famous Dickerson in the state of Michigan. Let's roll that, please, Ben. Did you ever have L.A. Dickerson?
Yes,
Lorianne?
she was. I was going to say, shout out L.A. Dickerson,
I love her.
too, the most incredible professor.
You get people like L.A. Dickerson, who's an absolute rock star. I'm thrilled that you had her. No wonder why you're so good.
Yeah.
L.A. is
shout
awesome.
out L.A.
I love
right?
L.A. Dickerson.
That's why we're here. Oh
is she still teaching up there? I know she was.
Is.
Okay.
Yep. She's awesome. And she's so great about keeping in touch with her alum too. Like, it's like we're her like kids. Like, I talk to her all the time. And I guess especially because I'm around Dan every day at the ballpark too. So she's always around. So I see her often.
She and I, Natalie, are both huge fans, not only of yours, but of your wife's. Just talk about her just a little bit as we close. And you have such a unique job where you're gone so much.
Yeah.
Like,
she's amazing.
She's the best.
She just is. I mean, in the last, as you know, I think it was 2016, they rebuilt the newsroom. So there was just kind of this dead space at Com Arts, and they turned into this beautiful newsroom with glass walls. Spent a lot of money on it, but she has now helped kind of build this sports program. She's built the sports journalism program and now sports broadcasting. Her background's in print, but the job she does with these kids, she just, she learned all the keys about, how do you look relaxed on camera? And she's got such a touch with just being able to, here, just think about this. Think about talking to your good friend. Her manner, and like Natalie said, she cares about her students. I watch her. Grading papers is time consuming. I mean, she is just, but she doesn't just put a number on it and hand it back. It's now it's electronic, but the comments, it's like trying to push. Your lead is so important. Push you to write a good lead. And then here's some of the elements. And the way she keeps it fresh, I'm so impressed. I mean, it's like you could just deliver this lecture in your sleep, going in today for whatever the subject is. It's like, no, she always wants to make sure there are current examples of how to file a FOIA, right? Freedom of Information Act, because these are big things. If you're a news reporter, you got to understand these things. And so, I don't know, I just think the world of her. I'm so impressed. The students love her, but she just throws herself into that job 24/7. I mean, the things that she deals with, outside of the classroom, just helping them navigate life. And then the whole idea of how to, get into whatever you're interested in. And that network of Spartan alums in journalism, in whether it's, I think there's 4 different MSU alums on the MLB.com beat, but all over. You saw the picture of Ryan Field, one of her first students. So it's just fun because it's allowed me to go up and be a part of that. I'll guest lecture. I teach a short course up there. And I see what she sees, that you're just energized by being on campus. There's a certain type of kid that goes to Michigan State, and there are a lot of good kids, and they're hard workers, and they want to be good at this. But the broadcast program that she's built and the opportunities, thanks to Big Ten U, with Big Ten, plus Big Ten Plus with the Big Ten Network, students get opportunities to produce, direct, shoot, be on camera, be a sideline reporter, whatever it might be. The opportunities have grown exponentially. Campus radio, they get to call games. And that's why now that I go up there and I do a play-by-play course, they've got opportunities then to take maybe some of that knowledge and go out. And before they really didn't. So it's she's something. And the what she's done and the people she's influenced in her career is phenomenal.
She's unbelievable. And a lot of MSU J school students, they'll watch the show, follow my stuff, and they'll reach out with questions or whatever, or they're aspiring, they're applying to Michigan State for journalism. They always ask, who should I try to get in a class in the J school? I always say her. And a lot of times they'll come back to me and say, oh, she's hard. Like, she's a tough grader. She's demanding. And I warn them up front, but she's tough. Listen to her, because she will make you.
She's trying to make you better.
And she will.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone that has gone through that program that's had her, and especially if they're working in this field, Natalie talked about it in that clip, you're better if you're under her guidance and tutelage. Just listen. And she's not unfair. She's just, high standard.
A high standard.
But, you're at that MSU
That's how you get better.
Yeah. I cannot say enough nice things about her, and really you as well. And I know she was helpful in getting you here, so I should thank her for that as well. I already owe her so much, but so LA, if you're listening to this now or at any point, I owe you like 72 favors, I think, by now. So let me know how I can make it up to you. Dan Dickerson, a legend in Detroit. Good luck tomorrow. I know you don't need it. You're going to do a great job as always on the call. I'm so excited to watch the rest of this run here.
I can't wait to hear Comerica Park tomorrow night. You talk about feeding off crowd. Woo, that's fun.
It's going to be a roaring there, I would argue. Maybe even more so Thursday, hopefully, if it's the clincher in the next one. Oh, my God. So, Dan Dickerson, pleasure. Thanks so much.
Justin, thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been fun.
Great to have you, and love to have you back anytime. I might twist Ellie's arm just one more time.
You got my number.
I won't call in too many favors. Thank you. Ben Augusta, thanks so much. Appreciate you. We'll see you guys. Go Tigers. Got a great run coming up. See ya.